Good morning. Two things. Yesterday, I should have looked closer. We were just supposed to read the first 20 verses of chapter 7. So today we'll do chapter 8, which is tomorrow's reading, and tomorrow we'll do chapter 9, Sunday's reading, and then Monday we'll do chapter 10, verses 1 through 18, like we're supposed to according to the Bible reading program. But I guess it's kind of immaterial in a lot of ways. And then tomorrow morning I'll be on for around 8 o'clock or so. It'll be on whenever you have a chance to look at it. That'll be as normal, but I'll actually be live tomorrow morning about 8 o'clock. So today, chapter 8 talks about food offered to idols and the eating of that food. And it makes me think about when Jesus and his disciples were walking through the grain field and they were hungry on a Sabbath day, and they picked some of that grain and they threshed it out in their hands and they ate it, and they were in trouble, with the religious leaders. But this is a little bit different what Paul is talking about. A lot of the food that was offered for sale in the marketplace came from animals that were sacrificed in the pagan temples. The pagan gods, they really didn't consume it or eat it or burn it up or anything that way. And the people who worked in the temples would use some of it for themselves, but there was always more than they needed. So when they had the extra, it would be sold in the marketplace, and then that money would go to the temple of the gods and to the people who were working and caretakers of the temple and the priests of the temple and all of that stuff. And so it was very commonplace now then for the Jewish people, for these early Christian believers, when they bought meat, that would probably be some of the meat that they would buy. And for some people then that was a stumbling block. It was a problem that people were eating meat sacrificed to these other gods, to these idols and stuff. And so Paul is talking about that here, and I like, he says, knowledge puffs up, but love builds up, and if we, people, we call people we call them pompous, people that have too much knowledge or boast about it and everything that way, but Paul is talking about how sometimes when we do something, it may cause someone else to waver in their faith. And I don't know if that's so awfully true today in today's society, but on the flip side of that, yeah, I guess if you were to, you watched your leaders of your community or your leaders of anything, if they're doing things against the law, or if they're doing wrong things, if they're saying one thing and doing another, well, what are we going to do? We're going to do that same. And we can't teach our children to do one thing while we do something else. And so this is kind of where Paul is coming from with this about eating meat, food offered to idols that way. He says that in verse 4. He says, as to the eating of the food offered to idols, we know that no idol in the world really exists. And it's a statue. It's something that is made by human hands that is not real. And they have no eating or drinking. And then he says, again, there is no God but one, and I agree 100% with that. There is only one God, our Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, the triune God that comes, the God of creation, the God who sent Jesus into this world for us. And he says, even though there may be many so-called gods on heaven and on earth, and he says there are, and we think about back in Acts as we read, as Paul was in Athens, and I see that you're a very religious society. You have temples to all kinds of gods, even to an unknown God. They had so many gods that they just didn't know what to do, and It was a god for anything and everything. And this is a lot of early societies did that. I mean, they'd have, the god of the rain, the god of the sun, the god of the moon, the god of everything, and would worship to many different gods that way. But he talks about that there is only one God. And so with this meat, with these offerings for these other gods, to these idols, there is no other God that they could be offered to. So he's in a way, he's saying that, to eat that meat isn't wrong. But, he says, but there's a caution, that if you do this and it causes someone else to sin, or if it causes a problem, then there's a problem. And he says, it's not everyone who has this knowledge that there is only one God, that the idols and stuff don't exist. Some have become so accustomed to idols that they still think of the food that they eat as food being offered to that idol. And so he's saying their conscience being weak is defiled. He says they're caused to sin and caused to wonder, and it's it's a stumbling block in their faith in God. Verse 8, Paul is in quotations, food will not bring us closer to God. We're no better off if we eat it or if we don't eat it. But then he gives us a cautionary in verse 10. He says, if others see you who possess knowledge, faith in God he's talking about, eating in the temple of an idol, they may, since their conscience is weak, be encouraged to eat that same sacrifice. So, it was customary for people to go and to eat in these temples of the idols. He said, if others see you eating in the temple of an idol. So this is a part of where so much food is coming. Think about they gave meat offerings, they gave grain offerings, they gave offerings of all kinds of things to these idols, to these false gods, and there would be meals prepared there, and so that the God of the sun is providing all of this for all of you. Come, and it's a potluck, it's a smorgasbord, it's a buffet. But Paul says that if you partake in that and it causes other people to wonder, to lose their faith in God, or to step away from believing in the one true God, he says, don't do that. The last line here, he says, if food is the cause of their failing, I will never eat meat. I mean, that's a pretty hard and fast statement. I mean, if I eat meat and it causes one person to fall away from God, I will never eat that meat, and it's so that I may not cause them to fall. I mean, it's really an extreme measure in so many ways, but and maybe that's where some of the don't eat meat on Friday came, or it's just different customs and things come that way. But I probably shouldn't have said, I don't know, but it's Paul is saying to us that we are our brother's keeper in so many ways. We are able to encourage them in their faith, and not only are we able to encourage them in their faith, but we're also able to draw them away, to cause them to fall away, to if they see us doing this and this and this, which according to God's standards we shouldn't be doing, and we're doing all of those wrong things, we could cause someone else to fall in their faith. And Paul is saying that it may be radical, it may be off the charts, but if there's something that I'm doing that's causing others to question their belief in God, to waver in their faith and trust in God, to begin to wonder, did Jesus really die for my sins? Paul says, I'm not going to do that. I will be the best example that I can be. And he's using this eating meat, or eating food offered to idols. I shouldn't just say meat, because they did offer other, grains and everything, vegetables out of the garden, everything were given as offerings. But Paul is reminding us that other people watch what we do, what we say, and how we treat others. And so we need to be aware of that so that we can encourage others in their faith by living out our faith.